when we begin a prayer group in the parish, it will not last for long. Either it start declining in number, or even if the number is to be maintained, we start losing the zeal. The appetite to pray is no longer there. The zeal and the desire to gather together is not actually there. Most of the time we come because we want to fulfill the law. Sometimes maybe we are afraid that they will punish us or they will fine us. What is actually happening? The initial zeal, what happens to it? Why is it disappearing so fast, so quick? So that's what we are trying to respond to. We have been given the causes for the decline of our prayer groups in number and in flavor. And last week we did talk about the neglect of the Lord for his work. Most of the time many people neglect the Lord and give attention to his work. And we did also mention one of the causes, the lack of servant leadership in the church. That's what we introduced last week, that we are going to continue with that today. And I did mention that one of the major difficulties we have in the church today is that we go in for people who are popular than those who are servants. We want people, we are selecting people in our groups, in our prayer groups, because we think that they are financially vibrant, they can help us, they can take care of the needs of the group. Maybe if there are contributions, they can come in for us. We also seems to select those we know they are popular. They know them in the parish, they have been there. And sometimes we do not take into consideration whether they have actually been servants in the group. Have they ever experienced stewardship before you select them? Now, in such a case, when it happens like that, and even during elections, when we do by elections, one of the things that we do not understand is the fact that whenever you cast your vote for a man in any place, whether politically or religious, in a religious circle, one of the things you do unconsciously is that you are voting for the man's ability and inability. That is to say, if the man you are voting is quick in anger, he cannot control himself. He is somebody, when he gets angry, he can do the unthinkable. And you are voting for him, maybe because he's nice now, you are actually unconsciously casting your vote that if he's going to be there for 3 years, you are going to support the anger of that man for 3 years. If it is somebody who does not know how to be steward, he is a lord. He lords it over the people. When you cast your vote, you are saying that I'm going to stay with this man for 3 years, even if he is going to be a dictator. So most of the time, we do not take these things into consideration. And when we elect people and bring people to position, when they are not servants, the difficulty is the group start crumbling, because you are expected that that person is going to lead by example. You know, Jesus made it clear in Matthew 20, 25 to 26. He said the Gentiles, the rulers of the Gentiles, lord it over the people. They dictate over them. They are people who want to use force. They want to command. And that's the reason the readings of yesterday, yesterday Sunday, the gospel did mention of the fact that they want to be seated in high places and be greeted, with a lot of respect. They want them to be greeted. And I say, call no one father, because you have only one father in heaven. He said, call no one master, because the only master you have is Christ. Now, Jesus was not saying that we should not call them father. He was trying to say that the center should be God. If they are pulling the attention to themselves, if they want that they should become more popular, I say, no, don't call them father. Let your center, the only person you have to consider who should be your center, is Jesus Christ, who is the master. So any leader who does not know how to be a servant and to direct people to Christ will certainly cause a decline in number and in flavor. He himself does not see the importance of prayers. When he's there, he's moving up and down. Sometimes in most of our ministries, most of the prayer groups, in the renewal in particular, you see why prayers are going on. Maybe in their section, opening prayers, worship, the leaders are outside discussing. In most of the cases, what are they talking about? You can't really pick out. They are outside talking and discussing other things. And then they come in, maybe during the time where one of them is supposed to take the word of God for exhortation, and then, or he's supposed to lead a prayer. For them, the rosary section is not for them. It is for other people. It's very, very important. These are the things that are showing that we do not understand why we are leaders. We are supposed to lead by example. And when you do not know how to lead by example, you push people ahead. Jesus said we should listen to what the scribes and the Pharisees they are telling us, because they are on the seat of Moses. But we should not do what he is not saying that they are good examples. He's saying that though they might be, they are not good example, but because they are on the seat of Moses, they should respect them. And most of our prayer groups, the people are just respecting us because they are afraid of the fine. They are afraid to have a bad name. They are afraid because other things will happen. They are afraid to leave the prayer group, not because they think that they are going to lose anything, but because they are thinking that maybe if they leave this prayer group and they die today, the funeral masses, people will not be there. So they just try to be there, pay their contribution, but their spirit, their flavor is not there. And this is the biggest difficulty we have. So lack of servant leadership is a big cause for the decline of our prayer groups in the church. And so Jesus says in Matthew 20:26, he says, it should not be so among you. We should not have people that lord it over them. We need to have servant leadership, not dictators. Those who give instruction and they are not there. And it's very, very important we keep that in mind. Leaders must lead by example. Leaders must lead by example. And sometimes, you see, leaders who are supposed to inspire people and draw them to follow the master, primarily, they are the people to mold them. The leaders are supposed to mold these people, to mold order in a godly manner. They can witness to their life. But most of the time you see leaders who have not led by example. Leaders who have not, there are three different areas where most of the time you find our leaders, most of the time they fail. There are three, in my little experience, I've seen in three different areas where you notice that the leaders are not actually, there are three measures, there are other aspects, but these three aspects I've seen which are very conspicuous. The first one is, leaders who do not want, who want to cross the limits of their leadership. They do not know their limit when it comes to the opposite sex. They take advantage of their leadership to cross their limit when it comes to relationship with the opposite sex. In most cases, those things cause a lot of scandals in the group. And when it happens like that, it ends up sending the people away. The flavor, it brings an odor, a perfume that is stinking, spiritual perfume. That is a kind of a spiritual odor that is stinking. People just pray, and then they are not convinced. You are, instead of being an inspiration to them by then, you are a scandal to them. You weigh down their faiths. So it is a major difficulty in leadership. Most of our leaders who are not servants, do not know their limits as leaders. They do not know their limits. It might not even be being involved with them, but the way you relate, the way you play with them, you have to be prudent. Sometimes you favor one more than the other. You are inclined. You do not have the willpower to speak out when it has to do with the truth. And when the Christians they perceive that, they start seeing that discrimination, you start making them to understand that you are not leading by example. And it's very, very, it is very, very scandalous to know that. That's one of the aspects where leadership has affected, has caused a lot of decline in number and in flavor. And it is so important we understand that. So important we understand that. The second aspect is lack of transparency. Transparency and accountability in finances. Financial matter. They are not transparent, they are not accountable. Most of the time, many of us who have not experienced stewardship, people just creep into the church. Secretly, they have not grown up. They have grown old without growing up in the church. That you have stayed in the church from the beginning till now does not mean you have grown up. You may have been in the church for long, but you have not grown up. You have grown old, but you have not grown up. And one man said it. He said they know the hymns, but they don't know him. They don't know Jesus, but they are familiar with all the hymns of the church, the Stations of the Cross. And such people, some of them even just immediately after they have come into a parish, you see them very, very active. They are so active in the church. And so with that, people start admiring them and start pushing them to take up positions. And when those things happen, those people, they have not grown up. And something that does not grow might only swell. It is only growth that lasts forever. Swelling does not last. And so when you appear on the scene before your time, you might disappear when your time will come. In such a case, when you give the person authority, he does not know how to manage because he has not gotten the skills of growth. He has not grown into maturity. There are two important aspects to know if somebody is actually growing, if he's matured. Humility and love. You may cast out demon. You might pray for people and do every other thing. If you are not humble, if you do not demonstrate what I call the liquid love of Christ, you are just a spiritual child. You are a spiritual kindergarten. It is very, very important we understand these things. So most of the time, this is the aspect where we fail. This is the aspect where we fail. And we are going to, it's important we take note of this. And when someone has not grown up to manage family, to manage life, to manage his own life, he is not transparency, because you can also cheat yourself. He is not transparency and accountable in financial matters. This kind of person can actually cause a decline in number and in flavor in prayer groups. In prayer groups, when that kind of a thing happens, it causes a lot of scandal. People start talking, they start clicking together. They create cliques and start fighting against the leader. And that alone leads to hurt that might also lead to unforgiveness. You see how it grows. And once the group is not together, when people are hurt, when people are not, they have been wounded to the point where they can't forgive. Even if you pray together, remember we did mention the other day about fellowship with God and with one another. They cannot have that fellowship, that koinonia with one another. They cannot have that fellowship with one another. They cannot stay together. Even if they are praying, they are just residing to fulfill, to pass time, to waste time. So the flavor is not there. They are present, but they are absent. They are present, but absent. Present in the flesh, but absent in the spirit. And we are talking about spiritual groups. And when you are present in the flesh, and while in a prayer group, you are in the house, thinking about your business, thinking about the food you are going to prepare, the family problems, you are thinking about the next day, the market you are going to visit. So you think about so many things. Those who are selling vegetables are thinking about vegetables. Those who are selling oil, they are thinking about, they are in the house actually counting the numbers they are going to buy. Some of them, they are thinking about the plantain. They are there, but they are busy in their house. It is causing a high decline in flavor. The zeal is not there. The desire is not there. That aroma that causes a prayer to be more desire is no longer there. And so when we lost that, the prayer groups, it's just a matter of time. The number will start reducing. There will be decline in number because there is already decline in flavor. Most of the time, the decline begins in flavor before it gets to the number. So it's very, very important. So we have talked about not knowing our limits, crossing our limits in relationship, especially with the opposite sex, and also lack of transparency and accountability in financial matters. We'll take a musical interlude, and when we come back, we'll continue with lack of servant leadership in our prayer groups.
sanctified for your own alone. And sanctified this is for your own alone. Take and sanctify this is for your own alone. Take and sanctify for your own alone. Take and sanctify this is for your own alone. Take and sanctify this is for your own alone. Sanctify.
Welcome, televiewers of Divine Mercy Radio Television. If you are just tuning in, we are on the program Lay Apostolate in the Catholic Church, and we have been dealing with the decline in our prayer groups in number and in flavor. The decline of our prayer groups in number and in flavor, and we have been given the causes. What is the cause of the decline in the prayer groups in the church? What reasons can we give for the rapid reduction, the leaving of members in the prayer groups? What is happening? And we are talking about lack of servant leadership, leaders who are not servants. And I was talking about 3 areas where you see those leaders who are not servants. And I did mention the first one, which is crossing the limits in their relationship with opposite sex. And we did also mention lack of transparency and accountability in financial matters. And the third one is lack of reconciliation and unity among members. Those words are exchanged sometimes in order to to clear their points. They might hurt each other. They might wound each other with words. And sometimes there is always this spirit of revenge that comes into place. Now, when the leaders are in loggerheads, who will reconcile them? So sometimes you might call the higher, maybe the deanery or the diocese to come into place. They come and they hold a meeting trying to sort out the stuff. But when the people are not sincerely reconciled, you leave physically, they claim that they are forgiven, but deep within the wounds are still there. And so now they don't talk. They try, only their action will tell you that they are not together. You see, they start becoming indifferent. You should do it. No, since you are the one that knows it, do it. So you see, the leader now is trying to withdraw. He's pushing maybe the assistant or another person. And then when he sends you ahead, he throws words on you of a sabi. And so you see with that, the members are sensitive to that. They perceive that the atmosphere is not yet an atmosphere of reconciliation. The lack of reconciliation. There is no unity. And in this, when it is like that, there is a major struggle. And I want you to understand that when a leader starts living a double standard life, that weakens his moral and his spiritual strength and make him ineffective. He becomes an ineffective leader. So it weakens the moral and the spiritual strength of that leader. So much that when you talk, you cannot pull the people, you cannot bring them together to do something. So sometimes when there's recollection, you see very few people. What are we coming to do? Prayer sections, they are not there. But in funerals, they will send their contribution. If there is feast, they will come. So you ask yourself, sometimes you get to the priest, what is actually happening? You are trying to bring the priest on board. He will come and talk with you people and go. But as long as the wounds are there, there is no reconciliation, the group will keep declining. The number will keep reducing. Sometimes the people are not willing to talk. And so you need to create an atmosphere for dialogue in order to help such a situation. So lack of servant leadership has actually caused more harm. More harm. And how do you cure that? The first thing is that we must have leaders who lead by example. Leaders who lead by example. They must lead by example. It is very, very important. They must lead by example. So leaders must be leaders. When you see their moral and spiritual capacity, it can inspire people. There are people, Paul said, imitate me just as I imitate Christ. Imitate, they can be imitated, they can be worthy of emulation. We can follow their example. We can admire them and look up to them. When they start bringing that flavor, you start seeing the joy in the leadership. You start seeing the joy in the leadership. It's very, very important. You start seeing the joy in the leadership. You know, and most of the time when you get to those places, when there is no, the leader does not lead by example, you know, when it is plagued with this kind of life, you know, what we commonly observe is that, you know, the group or the community tend to lose their zeal, their power and direction. And this is what we're talking about. When you talk about a group that does not have flavor, we are talking about a group that has lost the vision. The zeal is no longer there. The willpower is not there. So the direction. What is the vision? Which direction are we taking now? They don't just know. They just know that we have weekly prayers. Do we have any other activity that helps to boost the spirituality of the group? Any other activities that bring flavor in the group? Or it's just a repetition? You know, when we repeat the whole thing and we expect another result out of what we are having, we are just like mad people. Because a madman is someone that does the same thing over and over and is expecting a different a result. So we should not, you know, when we keep repeating, we bring in new things, flavor, and help the group. Can we go out, maybe in another parish for prayers? Can we go to another site for prayers? Can we learn to discover to pray in somebody's house? Can we visit the sick, or we just meet and go? I mean, nobody cares whether a member is sick or not. Even if nobody is sick, can we visit the poor? And when we are going there, how are we going? Are we going like a philanthropic group, or we are going as a spiritual group doing charity? Because a philanthropic group is more about we take care of the physical needs of the people. Do we go with the spirit of love and humility to touch the person, go beyond the give and sit with the person? Sometimes we get to some houses, maybe the atmosphere is not conducive, the house is not clean. We will not just sit, we just give the gift and we go out. Can we sit with the person? Are we able to, you know, one of the things about St. John Meriviani, they say he was able to bear bad odor. He can stay in an environment that is stinking and he will be there. So sometimes we actually get to a place where somebody is sick, you see people closing their nose. They are trying to close up, not to breathe in. You already give an impression to the person that is detested. You are detesting the person. Any gift you give there might not give the message. So are you seeing the idea? So we are a spiritual group. We go there and we are able to see beyond. We see beyond. So we must keep the zeal. We must keep the vision. We must keep the power. We must keep direction. We must be directed. And so we are talking about curing this kind of lack of this servant leadership in the church. And we have talked about leading. We must select those who lead by example. We must also have leaders who are, you know, who exercise their authority in love. In love. You know, somebody is absent for 2 or 3 occasions, or there are rules that are binding a group, and if you are absent, you have to pay this fine. And somebody is genuinely sick, he is ill, and he was not for prayers, and then you come, you group everybody. Sometimes trying to give you a reason, I was sick, you don't want to see. Somebody genuinely had a reason. You have to exercise now. You have to apply the constitution with love. Be merciful sometimes. It's not just any time you need to use the hammer of the Lord to hit on them. You have to exercise that authority with love. You have to exercise, because in loving as a shepherd, you bring them closer. You see, in Israel, one of the characteristics to manage stubborn sheep that were not always coming together, that were straying away from the fold, most of the time, the tradition of Israel holds it that the shepherd sometimes will have to, when he notices such a sheep, you break the leg of the sheep. When you break the leg of the sheep, what happens is that the shepherd will always move carrying that sheep. Why? The moment, the period that the healing is going to come, the sheep becomes familiar with the shepherd. He experiences the tender love of the shepherd. And so by that touch, the shepherd himself starts smelling like the sheep, and the sheep understanding, he perceives this, he knows the voice, he experiences the tender care of the shepherd. And after the healing, the sheep will always be beside the shepherd. So sometimes this is the love we need to manifest, even when we break the legs or the parts of the sheep. Even when we hit up, we have to bring in love. Love goes with mercy. It's important we keep that in mind. Very, very important. Now, the last one, we have talked about leading by example. We have talked about exercising authority in love. There is this one which is very, very important. Suffering as a leader. This is very, very important. Most of the leaders do not know that as a leader, you have to suffer. And so when they come in as a leader, part of the core of leadership is suffering. They are bound to be misunderstanding in the group. They are bound to be people who criticize you. They are bound to be people who disapprove of your point. And in such a situation, one of the things that leaders often find hard to face is the fact that in such a situation, they don't want to be unpopular, because especially somebody who is eloquent and convincing in his language can convince the crowd against the leader. And when you start becoming unpopular, you start building the beastful spirit, a revengeful spirit. You start hating those you are to lead, and anybody that is not for you becomes an enemy. It is one of the aspects which leadership we have to learn. So we have to learn to be the suffering leaders. In those cases, it's just like the vine dresser. The vine dresser needs to prune the branches of the vine. Sometimes by those who criticize you, those who oppose you, those who inflict some kind of suffering in your own leadership. If the vine will know the fruit that is going to bear after the pruning, the vine will never complain. And sometimes the